thank you everyone who's here to hear Louis and Josh talk about scope creep. My name's Colleen. I'm a growth marketing specialist here at Moovila, and I'm going to moderate this the best I can with these internet issues, but hopefully we're good now. I'm joined here with Josh, who works for centrexIT. Let's make sure I'm saying that right, Josh.
That is correct.
Perfect. Thank you. And then I'm here with Lewis, who works for Moovila, and he's going to kind of bring a vendor perspective, and then we're going to have MSP perspective from Josh, and hear some good stuff about scope creep. So, um, for whoever doesn't know this, we love to do fun facts. Lewis and Josh, are you guys ready for fun facts?
I am ready for fun facts.
All right, hit us with it, Josh. What's your fun fact?
Uh, I know you said that, and I was like, I'm gonna come prepared, but I kind of forgot. So I'll just go on my default ones. Two fun facts about me. I have a Guinness World Record, and I've also thrown out the opening pitch at a World Series.
Guinness
Now,
World Record?
yeah, so we'll see if it shows up here. The best part about those two fun facts is if I stop right there, they're way cooler. If I have to dig into them, then they lose. So got this little thing right here.
Yeah.
And how I got it was I just participated in the largest online Secret Santa. Nothing too crazy, but I wanted this to be on my desk, so got it. Um, for the other fun fact, I come from a restaurant background, so I have lots of MSP and restaurant experience. As part of that restaurant experience, I got to be a mascot, and the Little League World Series played in our town, and I threw the opening pitch at one of the Little League World Series. Still cool, but it's not the MLB, but it is still the World Series, so I'm claiming it.
It's the first pitch.
It's right. Opening pitch at a World Series.
Only
Not
gonna have one
That's
of those.
right.
that is a true sentence.
Yes. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong about that. So
No,
my fun facts,
that's
there you go.
amazing.
All
You saw
right.
how excited I got when you're like World Series. I was like, what? Because we were talking, you're Padres, I'm Cubs. We've got 4 days of the season left, 3 days. Still in first in my fantasy baseball league. That's not my fun fact. My fun fact, because I personally don't have any fun facts, is about because we talked restaurant industry before this, and kind of what's interesting is all three of us here worked restaurants, and the transfer from restaurants to MSPs and the stress and the fires and all that sort of stuff. But mine's a restaurant fun fact. So there's a podcast, How I Built This, with Guy Raz about businesses and how they started. And one of them was Chicken Salad Chick. I don't know if anybody ever saw this one. And Chicken Salad Chick, for those not in the South, is a restaurant. All they sell is chicken salad. Like, that's it. They got some other stuff now. But the woman who started it, she lost her husband and then needed to make some money. So started selling chicken salad out of her garage just to like people at her kids' school. And then met a guy, and he helped her grow it into a large franchise, and they fell in love, and she got married to him, and then he passed away. So she lost two husbands, and then she sold the business for like one of the highest multiples that a restaurant franchise has ever sold for, because they don't actually have, or they used to not have, any like hot cookware in their kitchen. So they get all of their chicken boiled off-site and sent in. So because they didn't have that, like their insurance premiums were way lower than everyone else, and she ended up selling it for like a massive, massive multiple. So
Interesting.
it's my fun fact.
Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome.
Beautiful. All right. Well, what we're all here for today, let's talk about scope creep. So let's start about, if my sentence could come out, that would be great. Let's start with how scope creep happens. So I guess, Josh, do you want to start? How does scope creep happen? What do you see in your experience?
Yeah, so in my experience, and I'm gonna definitely throw in restaurant analogies, all the time. So, first talking point is just that unclear scope of work, right? When you go into a restaurant, you see the menu, you pick what you want off the menu. You're saying, "Hey, this is what I want. I want a cheeseburger. I want a chicken salad." You don't go into there and you go up to the counter and say, "I'm hungry. I want to eat." That's not going to get you anywhere, right? You have a clear, defined, basically scope, right? So it's, migrate email, but what all goes into that? Is it you're just moving mailboxes, MX records, things like that? Or is it shared mailboxes, calendars? Like, what's everything that goes into that? So my first point then is just going to have that, clearly defined scope of work.
Beautiful. Louis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, that's all perfect. I think what's interesting about how it happens is how you define scope creep as well
Mhm.
too. And interesting enough, we've had a lot of conversations internally about scope creep and this week. Um, and scope creep and scope change kind of get grouped together, right? And I think for me, to put it at the most basic level, it's anything that negatively impacts the budget on your project, that impacts your margins. Like, to me, that is scope creep, because you can have scope creep and it can be managed with a change order, and then the scope of that project changes, right? So as long as you're managing whatever that creep or that change is, but it happens a number of different ways. It's a technician goes on site to do the project, and then someone's there and they're like, oh, hey, my computer's been acting up, can you work on this for me? And then the engineer does that for them, and then they put that time into the project, where that really should be a service ticket, right? So that's a really common way that we see. You also have, to your point, Josh, like, are you clear on what you sold, right? And then the customer has different expectations, then the operations team gets handed off. Then you also have, for me, coming from a manufacturing space, you got scope creep when internal stakeholders for the project jump in randomly and they're like, well, what about this? Like, for us, we did manufacturing lines, like, oh, can we get that automated sensor that gets added there? And then the vendor's like, oh yeah, absolutely, no problem. Then it's an extra $1 million. And then your accounting team's like, why did this project budget go $1 million over? And you're like, well, so it happens so many different ways. But I think, to me, bringing it back to how you define it, and for me, it's what negatively impacts the margin and the budget on your projects.
Yeah,
Okay.
you talked about two other key points, is that communication and those just one more thing requests. I mean, we've all been there. You want to be helpful, you want to service the client. It's, hey, while you're there, can you set up, these computers, or like, we've been having this issue, like, can you take a look at that? And it's like, hey, you need to take a step back. And again, I'm going to bring this back to the restaurant almost every point. If you order, like, again, we're ordering a cheeseburger or a chicken salad, and you say, well, you're already in the kitchen, like, just whip me up a cake, or bring me a dessert. Like, does the restaurant, like, they're not doing that for free? That's a, that's a change order, and you got to pay
Yeah,
for that, right?
yeah, yeah. That's perfect. I mean, it's and there. I think it's hard, right? Because you made the point, Josh. You want to help your customers. You're there to service your customers, and it's really hard for somebody to say no. We all know that, right? If you're on site and the customer asks for that, it's really, really hard for that engineer to say no. And maybe you don't say no. Like, maybe the company policy is like, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. If it's under, I don't know, 2 hours, whatever it is, but just make sure the customer understands that too, whether or not the resource on site is like, yeah, this is definitely is outside of the project. It should be, it should be a service ticket. It should be another project, but I'm going to go ahead and knock this out for you. Right. Like, so the customer understands, yeah, we're doing extra for them, but also that needs to be communicated to whoever's managing that project. So then that can be brought up to the customer at the end. Like, yeah, just a heads up, like, we did all this work for you, but again, that was not part of the original scope, and just build that trust, right? And continue to build that relationship with the customer.
Yep.
Louis, you're kind of talking about communication. That might be an early warning sign, not the best communication like with a client, and that could probably cause scope creep down the line. Are there any other super big red flags, like, oh, here's an early warning sign that this project's probably going to go off track? Josh?
Yeah, ambiguity. That's the biggest one. Whether it's on the client side or the team side, if there's any ambiguity, the scope can be at risk. So those are things like we had talked about. Hey, while you're in there, can you also do this? It'll only take a minute. But even on the internal side, right? If your techs are asking, well, am I supposed to configure this? Am I supposed to do this? Hey, did we cover this at all? Like, again, it goes back to that communication, that scope of work, all of those things. That's all should have been taken care of in building the project and doing the project plan. But when it's comes time for execution, if there's ambiguity, if this thing comes up, then we're getting derailed. Like, it's not an if, it's gonna happen.
And it's a great point too, because it's the ambiguity leads. I mean, it's that, and within itself, I think, can be scope creep, because your margin is going to start to go out the window on day one of the project, because the operational techs are going to essentially have to do rediscovery on the project. Like, what are we actually doing? And you're going to have an internal meeting with 4 different resources that's an hour long. So that's 4 hours of work associated with that project. And for me, like you asked the question, Colleen, what's a red flag? Is if when the project gets handed off to operations and the scope is, I'm going to keep just following Josh's coattails here because he's nailing it. Like migration. Like you get the scope and it says just like migration $10,000 and there's no details behind it. And that's maybe you don't put those details in front of the customer. Totally fine. But there's needs to be some sort of documentation somewhere so the operations team knows like how did we get to $10,000, right? Or was it just put it up in the air and we think that's what it'll cost?
Okay. So love it. How would you say once you start noticing these red flags, how are you going to kind of work back from that and prevent that from happening any further?
I would say just don't wait until scope creep shows up to it. Just, bake change management into the process up front so your clients have an expectation on how that just one more thing will be handled. And on top of that, having those hard conversations early. It's a lot easier to explain that on day one rather than day 90 and when you're in the project doing this, right? So setting clear expectations from day one.
Talking about internally with your team, or are you talking about with the client or
I
both?
would say, I mean both, right? Again, let's step back into the restaurant, right? You're running in, and when you sit down at a restaurant, you're given that menu. So that's day one. It's setting expectations. Here's what's available. Here's what it costs, and maybe here's how long it takes, depending on what type of restaurant you're going to. So if you're starting to ask for things that aren't on the menu, like you're at the chicken salad place and you're like, I want sushi. Well, you got two choices at that point. You can explain that it's not included, or you can go back to the kitchen and be like, hey, I need you guys to figure out how to whip up sushi here. And you're halting the delivery service. Now you're not providing the best service because you're trying to deliver something you were never set up to do. So again, going back to the projects, that scope of work, that's the menu. It needs to stick to it, what to expect. But there are times when you have to go off the menu or you want to go off the menu to provide a better customer experience. So let them order off the menu, but let them know what that process is or guide them through the process. And now, you can kind of make everyone happy in that case.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's easier to have those conversations earlier than later. You order a burger and you say, "Can I get some avocado on that?" If the server is just like, "Yeah, no problem," right? And then at the end, you get a bill for 4 slices of avocado for $5. You're like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I wouldn't have gotten avocado for $5." But if you make that point at the beginning, like, "Hey, it's going to be an extra $5 for our 4 slices of avocado because that's what avocados cost today," right? Then you're either going to go, "Oh, that's, what, I don't need it, leave it off," or you're going to go, "Okay, I got it." So when you get the bill, you're not surprised that you have that increased cost.
Cool. Did either of y'all have any tips about like how to improve your documentation to to prevent scope creep, or like, change order request processes that you've seen work where you're like, you know what, people should be doing this to prevent scope creep?
It does come to documenting the process. So going back to like the email migration, or one of the projects that we do quite a bit of is our Microsoft hardening. So really any project that we do. So regardless of what tool you're using and whatever tool you have, having the tasks that are clearly outlined and defined that get to that point. First off, if you're charging $10,000 for a migration project and you don't have those tasks and the amount of time it takes to do those tasks baked in, how do you know that your project is profitable? Are you losing money on it, or are you making an insane amount of money where, what you're charging is just not in line with what it should be, right? So getting those tasks and breaking them down and putting hours on there can set those expectations. And again, they don't need to be externally facing. Maybe it's internal, but then again, you're doing repeated processes, repeated outcomes of it. So it's just start there of email migration. So here's everything that we do of what's included. And it doesn't need to be how to do the task, but it at least needs to have all of those subtasks with some sort of time frame around those, a half hour to do this, etc.
Okay. Louis?
Yeah, it's like the menu, right? Where I've seen scope creep, it's always going to happen. So let me say that too. Like, it doesn't matter how great you get and how perfect you get and how unbelievable your process are. Like, scope creep happens. That's why project management is a thing. That's why we're all here today. Like, it is going to happen, but where I've seen a lot of success is when you get better alignment between sales and operations. And you probably heard me say this before, like, sales and operations, always butt heads. Doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter if it's MSP or restaurants, right? Restaurants, you have the servers or the sales,
Yeah.
and the kitchens, the operations, and they're like, what is this mod on this? Like, no, we can't make it. We're not going to serve somebody a burger rare. Like, we're going to get salmonella poison. Like, no matter what it is, there's always confrontation between those two organizations. And where I've seen a lot of success, MSP space specifically, is you catalog your project product offerings, right? So if you do a migration, you know what a Gmail to 365 or a 365 to 365 is. Like, you catalog those out and you have at least a framework, to Josh's point, what those tasks are in that to get to that, and adjusting those quantities, right? Every project's going to be different. Here's our baseline. And you made a great point, Josh. Like, it doesn't matter what tool you are using. You can do this in a OneNote. You can do it in a spreadsheet. You can do it. I would recommend not the back of a napkin, because napkins are hard to keep track of. But, like, just do it, right? Like, catalog that. What are we going to sell? And then that way, when it gets handed off to the project team, they know, like, okay, we're doing a Gmail to 365. Here are the tasks that go into that. Oh, okay. Like, at that point, you have more detailed conversations, like, well, why do you think that the migration for this one piece or application or calendar is only going to take 3 hours? Like, they have 1,000 users, right? So then it allows you to get even better and further into those detailed conversations.
Cool beans. Thanks. All right. Boohoo. So scope creep happened. It's right in front of your face. Let's talk about what we're doing now that scope creep has happened, how we're kind of rolling with the punches. Josh, what would you say?
Yeah. So, first off, like, again, this is one of those tough conversations. So, starting with a collaborative tone. So, trying to figure out, hey, let's solve this together, instead of getting defensive, trying to point fingers, trying to point blame on that. You're working with them and you're trying to set a boundary with them. So, separating kind of the people from the problem. So, acknowledge the value of, why did it go off, or is it something they requested? And then let's figure out, pivot that to what is our process. So how can we make this happen through a change order, or what trade-offs are going to be required to make this happen? So again, going back, like, sometimes you don't just say, no, we don't do that. But again, like, back to the restaurant, like, instead of saying, hey, we can't do that, but, like, maybe we can do this. We can prepare this special, but it's going to take a little bit longer. It's going to cost a little bit more. It'll be, outside the flow. Or one thing, I particular did as a manager, I worked for a Buffalo Wild Wings, and there's really nothing special about that place. Maybe, like, their Asian
Hey,
sauce, it's pretty great, but,
hey,
like, you can get wings and beer and watch sports at dozens of places. But when you make that experience a little bit better, sometimes, again, you're going off of the menu and you're doing that, but there are trade-offs for it. So, if I had the time or explanation of building that, it would be like, yeah, I can mix these sauces for you. I'm not going to tell the kitchen to do it. I'm going to go do it because it's going to break their flow. It might take a little bit longer, and set that the expectation of, "Hey, we can't do this every time, but you know what? We're slow right now. We have the time. Like, let's whip something up for you." Or sometimes you got to be that bad guy and look, I know you want that, but I can't make that happen this time.
but you can save a bad meal with great service. You can't you can't save you can't save an experience with good food if you have bad service. Like, it
Perfect.
doesn't, right? It doesn't matter where you go. And you see, it said a how question, and there's a book out there, Never Split the Difference, about FBI lead negotiator globally wrote a book, and he's got, like, a consulting firm now. But it's, instead of going back and saying no, you ask a how question, right? So, you know, we have people that come to us and say, hey, this isn't working, we want out of our contract early, right? And it happens for everybody, and my typical return to that is not just no. It's, well, how do you handle that? you're an MSP. How do you handle that when your customers come to you for that? Like how do you handle that, and how would you expect us to handle that? So it's having a little bit of empathy in those conversations when the scope creep pops up and when it happens. Um, and it's documenting it too. Like it might be like, yeah, to your point, I'm going to go do that for you this time, right? But you need to document that in that project, and you need to make sure that it's clear so that whenever who goes back and looks at that project and the customer is like, well, the last time we acquired a company and you did a migration for us, it only cost 20 grand. Why does it cost 30 now? Right. And you can go back and look at that other project and clearly see whether it's a note category or a note type you throw in there, like, well, we went over on this. Let me drill into that. Let me look at that note. Like, oh, hey, it was clearly defined. You had that conversation that you had a bunch of extra applications you didn't inform us on, so that that's why it costs more this time. We got to include it, right? So just document it, right? However you end up handling it, like document it so that you know what happened.
I think that brings us to a kind of a bonus tip that's outside of the scope creep of when you're doing these projects, having a post project review to look at those things like, hey, what are some things that like were stuck or things that came up so we can improve this process next time. And that's really getting on that proactive side of not just, oh, scope creep happened, we dealt with it, that's that. Like actually sitting down afterwards and having that brief, like again, this is mostly internal of what things are
Yeah.
missed. Oh, well, when we did this migration, this primary business application broke and we had to spend time fixing it. And, really like that, again, scope creep, like you weren't expecting it, was, you did your discovery, you did everything right. You didn't know about it. And because it was caused by the project, like, yeah, you got to fix it. And you're probably not charging the client for it because what you did and what agreed on broke it. But now you have that for next time. Like, hey, we have this documented. We ran into this. So if a client has this PBA, well, we need to add, 5 hours to do whatever that work is. So that's your bonus tip is debrief projects.
That's
And
great.
bring sales into that too, right? Like on the review, it's not just the operations team internally, like, hey guys, good job on this project, or hey guys, we missed the mark. Like sales needs to be included in that conversation for them to see like what went well, what went wrong, so they know that, oh, okay, next time I'm scoping this project, I need to make sure I ask this question, right?
That's great. So how would the both of you say, all right, let's say client comes to you, they want to add something else into the project. How do you kind of have that conversation and say, like, yes or no, we can do that, and explain how that change is going to impact the project overall or maybe the cost? Either of you?
Yeah, I kick it back to whoever sold the project at that point, right? So it depends who that goes to. If it's an engineer, whether they're on site, or the project manager. Again, Josh made a comment about having hard conversations. Your engineers don't want to have hard conversations. That's why they're engineers, right? They want to solve hard problems and be heads down and focus on that. You're going to have people out there that like to interact and have those conversations. Project managers should be able to have those conversations, right? So project managers should be able to get that request and say, yeah, totally hear you. We'd love to include that. That is different from what sold you on this project. Like I've got to kick you back to the VCIO or sales rep, right? Whoever, and that keeps that line of separation, right? Like the operations team is executing on it. If it's a different piece that needs to be sold, that needs to go through the sales team.
Yeah, agreed. The engineering team, the people doing the work, the more time that they're spending managing the project, the less time that the project is taking to get done.
Yeah.
So that's where you do have your project managers or sales. I mean, that's their job to do that. And the age-old answer in IT is always it depends, right? Like maybe the answer is no, maybe the answer is yes, but hey, maybe the answer is a change control of why did this come up? So digging in and finding the why. And then again, having that collaborative effort of, okay, well, we'll see what we can do to accommodate you. Here's ABC of our options. What would you like to move forward with? Separate project, change order, or, we can do it this time because, oh, it's 10 minutes. Like we've wasted more time talking about it than it has to just do it. Right? So figuring out all of those, but it does need to come from project manager, sales, I would say remove that from the operations. I mean, really that's the job. And there are, some people who poke fun at project managers out there, but that's where their value lies, is defending the engineers and preventing them from all the behind the scenes stuff that goes on with it. So the engineers can just work on doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball at you, Josh. So we were having this conversation about scoping and with some other customers this week, and I had one that said any person in our company can create a scope. Like doesn't matter. Like everybody has the ability. He's like approval process different. Like it's got to go through an approval,
Yep.
but they take the stance of like anybody can like, so if whether it's an engineer on site or a project manager or whoever it is, like anybody in their company can create a scope for a customer on a request, which I was like, at first I was like, oh, that's terrifying. Why would you do that? But then he's like, well, we got an approval process, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say like it's good to have that empowerment, but at some point that kind of reduces the scalability, right? So you can, so having everybody to have the ability to do it, I think is fine, but I still think that there needs to be a funnel, and maybe sometimes it is a bottleneck, but those core processes exist for a reason. So like for me on my side, even though that I can make a recommendation, I can give them the budgetary for it. I can tell them everything about it. Maybe sometimes I'm even doing the project on the security side. I still have to go through a specific role for them to make what's called a PR, or project request, which then, even if we call them the VITEM, the virtual IT manager. So it's kind of like a technical account manager. We do have VCIOs, but that VITEM is in charge of making that PR. So I can bring everything to them, but I'm not the one who submits it. I go to the VITEM and I work with them, and then they're the ones who submits it, which is our process, right? If I skip that process, maybe I'm missing a step, maybe I'm not doing something right, because then the our design desk would then have to ask me questions and things like that. So, I mean, again, I see the empowerment, and we're not stopping anyone from creating those, but it still has to flow through what that process is of submission, because I mean, it's scalable, and that's how we ensure that the projects are getting, delivered correctly.
Yeah, I think and that helps. I can't say eliminate, but it helps limit scope creep
Yep.
for sure. Because to your point, you could miss something, right? Like you on the help desk side or build side, you might not know that, oh, it's in this other state, so sales tax is weird or different or whatever it is, right? And then you get to the end of the project and you haven't collected sales tax, and you got to then just eat that. So I think making sure you have the process, just have a process. Just it could
Yep.
be simple as 1, 2, 3, 4. Just have a process, right? That's going to help limit the scope creep.
Louis, you being an operations guy and working with sales, I know not necessarily for an MSP, but talking about the community or the communication between teams. What are some of the most effective tips for your, like, you know what, this communication or cadence I have with the sales team as operations, this is what's worked for me, and I could see this kind of removing risk of scope creep going forward.
The first piece is whatever, it doesn't matter what industry or whatever it is. Josh already nailed it. It's a post project review. It's hey guys, you sold A, we did B. A doesn't equal B, right? Here's what happened on this one. Here's what went wrong, so that everybody can learn from that moving forward. Operations team, if they get handed another project or like that, right? And again, you've got hopefully your some sort of catalog where you're aligning what's being sold to what's being executed. Within what's being executed, you can throw risks, right? Or notes or whatever you want to call it in there. Like, hey, on this project, look out for that. So to help bridge that gap, the post project review is the number one thing, right? The second is, just it's human nature. Like, just don't be a jerk, right? Don't
Yep.
point the finger. Don't be like when the leadership is like, hey, why were we 5%? Why did we miss our margin by 5% on this project? The first words out of your mouth should be like, well, sales sold it wrong. Like that's not going to bode well for anybody. It's not going to bode well for you on the operation side, because sales can be like, well, I don't want to deal with those people. They throw me under the bus, right? Just don't point the finger, right? Like work through it together, make sure they understand, make sure they're on the same page, and you approach the problem together. It's hard. doesn't, I'll say that it doesn't matter what industry you're in or where you're at, or it's always hard. It doesn't matter.
I mean, it's like it goes back to the restaurant. I mean, how many of us were sitting there waiting for the food, and the server's like, "Man, the kitchen just sucks today." And then you talk to the kitchen, and they're like, "Those, dang servers just, they suck
Yeah.
with all their modifiers. They're not running food right." And you just get
Yeah.
the you're butting heads, right? So just, I mean, yeah, don't be a jerk and collaborate. If you want a professional tip that'll kind of give you a superpower, is if you're on the sales or the operations team, take the time to collaborate and learn the other side's processes and kind of how to see it through their lens. Even if you're not doing the job, then you at least kind of understand where they're coming from and understanding their perspective on it, which will just overall let you do your job better. So just having that collaborative mindset and overall team rather than, butting heads and blame.
Yeah, it's back to the empathy a little bit too. Just, if sales comes to the operations, just be like, hey, I know this stinks. I know you don't want to do this. I know we didn't sell enough hours. We got approval from above. We just want to really get this client in the door so that we can get that recurring revenue. Like, I know we're going to eat it on this project. We're all in this together, right? So just have a little bit of empathy, right? And communicate. It's always good to self-deprecate, and it's always good to show that you understand the struggles that the other side might have.
How do you suggest you find that balance between protect your team? I know Josh was talking about this earlier. That's kind of the role of the project manager, to protect their team and have those difficult conversations. How do you balance that with being the guy who says, "Hey, the kitchen sucks today"?
I, 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 I don't like that question, and I'll tell you why. It's because at the end of the day, if you work for the same company, you're all on the same team.
Yep.
It like, yeah,
For satisfaction.
right. Like at the end of the day, everybody should be marching towards the same common goal, right? You're all there to grow the business and make your customers happy and service your customers. Sure, you need to protect your team and your employees and what all that, but at the end of the day, like, everybody's there to do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like I mean, we'll go further off like the like a football analogy. That it's like you watch any of those press conferences, and if the quarterback is throwing making all the throws and the receivers just are dropping the passes, like sure they might handle that internally, but in that press conference they're not like, well, if the receivers caught the damn ball, like we would have been fine, right? They're not. It's hey, we as a team failed, like we succeed together as a team or we fail together as a team. So not pointing those fingers, you're all trying to get a touchdown. You're all trying to do this project correctly. So again, not pointing the fingers and figuring out what can you do to help them. At some point, maybe there is some sort of internal conversation that needs to be had about accountability or, but that is a manager level conversation and not project manager individual. But, as far as like client facing or doing this, it's a team and a team effort, and pointing fingers doesn't do anything, right? So trying to find what can help, and doing that.
And this can get tricky, but it depends on your compensation model as well too, right? Typically sales are compensated off commission. Operations depends, right? You might compensate engineers off utilization. What I've seen work in some instances, and again, everybody's got to be on the same team. If you have division and you have butting heads, it's really hard. But at the end of the day, the margin to me is where both teams are bought in, right? Sales should be selling it at a price that margin hits your goals, and operations should be executing so that you hit your margin goals. And if both teams are rewarded on the execution of the margin on an overall project and then of a professional services department, that can help collaboration between the two teams. But I'll tell you, that one's hard to get sales bought in on, right? It's hard to get operations bought in on too, because operations be like, well, they didn't sell the project for enough. And there'll be some of that, but you can't. If you drive that we're all on the same team, we're all trying to do the same thing. It can work.
Perfect. Thanks. All right, so let's get a little more general. I know we talked about like how to prevent scope creep, how to deal with it when it's here. But let's talk about like big picture. What are your number one top tips? to prevent scope creep? Like if you had a list, let's say top three for each of you.
For me, I mean, so documentation is number one. So creating the menu, really ideally. So that it all starts with that. Communication is, I mean, really number two. Those are the top two. So whatever I come up with as three, it doesn't hold the same. Like that's, on a tier list, like documentation, communication are up on top. I don't even know what I don't have a third because those two are just so important. So I'm gonna I'll save you guys some homework. Those are the two.
Okay.
Documentation. Yeah, having the catalog, knowing what you sold. To me, part of that documentation, I guess, is the breakdown of how you got to the end product. Is your work, and I know that I'm biased because I'm coming from the project management software guy here, but I see it all day, every day, where people go, well, we sold 100 hours. And I go, okay, so your work plan, your estimated hours on all your tasks, your tickets, whatever you call them, that should roll up to 100 hours. I'm like, well, I don't really know. I actually think it needs to take 120, it needs to take 90, whatever it is. Like having the breakdown of the hours and at least understanding how the team got there, this all rolls up in documentation. That to me is super important. I don't know how anybody can manage a budget on a project if you don't have that. Oh,
That's
that's
one.
only two.
Two?
Yeah. Three.
Yeah, you get
Pro,
top two.
process, right? Like process for how you're submitting scopes and how you're building your scopes. Process for how you have the conversations when it pops up as well too. And outline kind of what are those generic instances when it does happen. So train your techs. If you go on site and somebody asks you to do something outside of the project, do X, Y, and Z. Make it really clear and simple for them. So just having a process.
Josh, I'm curious if you productize your offerings much at your MSP.
Yes, I do. That's actually what I got brought in to do. So I've actually, going back to my MSP career, I've built out cloud solutions offerings and cybersecurity offerings, both on the SOC side and vCISO side. So, and again, part of that is hey, what is missing from our service model? What do we need? And then building out whether it's a service offering that's MRR or projects that are NRR. And I'm happy to dive into either one of those if you'd like. But yes, I've definitely built those. Working at a smaller MSP where you're wearing tons of hats is stressful, but it's also really good, kind of career development because you have to be that like pre-sales engineer, even the sales engineer, like you're, kind of door to door. Like in an MSP, almost everybody is in a whether it's direct or indirect in a sales role, you're affecting the service and things like that. So sales, pre-sales, your project management, maybe you're doing it, maybe you're post-project support, you're doing A to Z, right? And it's seeing that whole process end to end has been very helpful. And also now that I'm in a bigger company that has like a project manager, it makes me appreciate, oh my God, I don't have to do that part because I have somebody I can trust that does that. So but yeah, I've done it all.
Great.
How do
And
you build? Sorry, I was
uh,
just going to ask Josh, how do you build flexibility into those offerings, though? Right, like so, if you have the offering, do you have a line item that's like miscellaneous where pre-sales can drop in some extra hours? How do you build flexibility in?
It's hard when you're doing something that you haven't done before. So it's just kind of like you kind of built a little bit of padding. And again, going back to, all right, we need to have a post-project review of this. And, maybe we remove the padding, maybe we add those padding. We're doing those things. So, trying not to do it super lean, building just some sort of extra hour padding into it, to ensure that you have it covered. And then also, the first couple of times you do something, especially if it is legitly the first time, even with an experienced tech, you're not going to be as efficient on it, right? So you build it out and you're like, okay, this is going to be 20 hours. Well, you find the first one you do is like 25, 30, and you're looking at, well, what do we do? But then as you do it more, you get those efficiency gains. And whether it's through technical automation, whether it's just, hey, I know what I'm doing now, or we have a template for sending this out. The first time you do this, you have to send out all of this change control, but now you have that template of, these are what we've done. So you don't have to build that again. So by 4, 5, 6, your 20-hour project is now taking 14, 15, and you're getting back that margin.
Nice. Louis, I know you coach people on productizing your offerings. Do you want to talk a
Mhm.
little bit about how that's helped MSPs that you talk to?
Yeah, yeah, it's bridging the gap between sales and operations, right? It's so that when a scope of work comes in and it has these three menu items on it, operations knows, oh, it's related to these three templates or these three phases within these templates. Onboarding is probably the most common one that I see, right? You have every MSP has their standard onboarding, their standard set of tools that every one of their customers has to get. And then they'll have add-ons, right? So, oh, do you want to buy the cybersecurity package? Do you want to buy the extra training package? Do you want to buy the, VCIO roadmap package, whatever it is? So that when it gets handed off to operations on the onboarding, like, oh, yep, everybody gets our standard onboarding. We know every project gets that. Oh, yep, they did get cybersecurity. Let me pull that piece into the template as well too. So it's clear, you know what you need to do it, you know what you need to work, you know what was sold, and it just helps eliminate the risk for scope creep.
Well, I think too, and this is something like not every MSP is going to do, but as you mature and grow, your projects engineers need to be separate from your help desk engineers, because then again will help with the scope creep. When you have people who are just doing projects and they're not having to do the day-to-day tickets, and understanding that that does come from a little bit privileged isn't the right word, but there has to be a maturity level and a revenue level to support that. But it is
Yeah.
something to strive for, is having it separated, because your NRR and MRR are going to be a little different.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that one's a really hard one too, right? Like when do you get to that tipping point? And what you can do is you can just allocate time for a specific resource. Be like, all right, Josh is working like 30% projects now, 40%, 50%, 60%. Usually when you get to 70, 80, it's like, okay, Josh is all projects, right? And you backfill on the support side. Josh is all projects. Let that next person build up to that point and then roll them over.
Josh, what do you think about projects? That's something we've had a webinar on in the past, talking about projects. So basically building out a project in a service ticket. Have you done that before? And what are your thoughts?
So, yeah, because you'll get those like tickets where you're like, man, this is just outside the scope of our service desk. So talking about goes back to the documentation. It does come down to clearly defining what your services, like your MSA offerings are. Like, hey, this is what is included in your MSP, whether like all you eat, all you can eat per client, whatever service delivery method you're using, these are the service delivery outcomes. So when you get something that's crazy like that, like, hey, this is not a ticket, like this needs to be a scoped project. So then, going to whatever the account manager is, whether it's project manager, having a conversation with them. We actually had one that just came across not too long ago, a couple days ago, where a client of ours wanted us to do data recovery. They're like, hey, we have this, we can't get this to boot. We need these files off of here. Here's what you want us to do. What we want you to do, like here's the scope of what you want us to do. And it's like, okay, well, first off, this is way outside the scope of what our service desk does. And second, like we don't do data recovery. It's highly specialized. So we got the ticket, we looked at it, we internally discussed it, had a huddle on it, and we're like, yep, we can't do this. And then went back to the Vitam to have that conversation with the client, and then provided them a path of, hey, this is, who we can recommend you to go to. But it does happen, but it all comes down to having those service definitions clearly defined.
How would
Yeah,
you
and if
define
you, sorry,
list?
go ahead.
Oh,
I was just gonna say if you do have all you can eat, like I have seen people that include projects in their agreements, like it still needs to be tracked as a project. Like, and you still need to associate it with the agreement so that when you do a profitability by customer, you can see like, ooh, I don't know if we should be including projects anymore, right? Like that's a lot of work, right? Sure, we've automated a lot on the service side, but like we are burning through hours on projects. So you just need to still track those things separately.
yeah, what I was going to ask is, Josh, what's your fine line between this is a definition of a project and this is a definition of just a long service ticket? Do you have a
Yeah.
threshold?
That's a hard one. Because it could like It's like, well, it could activate change management, but that's like, because I'm thinking like of a firewall rule, like, hey, add this firewall rule. That's, I think it might come down to, well, because even a time, maybe it is a long service ticket where it's just 2 hours of the time. So I'm going to say there isn't like there's a little bit of a gray area, but I think it comes down to more of a larger change in the organization, so change control, or maybe like an expertise level sort of thing. Maybe there's a cap of hours, like, hey, if it's anything over 2 hours, it needs to be ran as a project, whatever that defined line for you is. So I think it's a combination of what kind of change is being requested, the expertise level that it's going to take to pull this off. Because if it is something that your service desk can't do, that it maybe a tier 3 or a project engineer has to do, or depending on the hours. So if it is going to take over 3 hours, so some sort of combination of those levers would then make that determination.
It like you just had the perfect example on the data recovery, right? Like right? Like you, if something comes in, you can be like, I I don't, this didn't feel right. Like I feel like this shouldn't be a service ticket.
Yeah.
Like just have a quick huddle. Like guys, what do we think? Like do we want to run this as a project? Is this something we can do? Is this something we can't do? I try to put some guide rails around it. I think we typically throw out like anything over over 10, multiple resources is a common example, duration is a common example, but just like have some sort of framework on it and have the flexibility around that. But if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. So
Yeah, if it's like, hey, this one person they joined our team and we need to like, get their old email onto it. So maybe that's an export import of a PST mailbox. Like that could be a service ticket. But now,
yeah,
hey, we've acquired this company. We're taking 5 or 10 employees and we need to migrate. Okay, that's a project.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but the floor is open to anyone that might have questions. I did want to give a little bit of time for people to ask. The Q&A is probably a good spot to drop them. And in the meantime, while y'all are doing that, I want to tell you about next month's webinar. Not to make an abrupt change, but we're going to have Don Sizer and Reagan Roney from the Tech Degenerates, two of the founders of the Tech Degenerates, joining us October 10th. And they're going to be talking with Louis about what MSP projects used to look like, what MSP projects look like now, and the future of what MSP projects are going to look like. So that's going to be a lot of fun having them on. There's also going to be a survey when you guys close out of this and leave the Zoom. It's just going to ask you a couple questions like, are there any crazy topics that you really want to talk about, project or resource management related at all? Anyone that you really want to hear from, we should invite on a webinar. Any of
You're
that?
tired of me. Like get Lewis off of there. Him and his fun facts that nobody cares about.
Hey, I care. That was a cool fun fact. I didn't even know about this chicken salad place. I'm in. I want to try it.
It's you can get a chicken salad sandwich with a side, a cookie, and a drink for $12 still today, which is like nuts.
Yeah.
All right, listen, Josh. Anonymous attendee has said, not a question, but regarding the line between service request first project at our org, we call it the 555 rule. If it takes 5 or more hours, affects 5 or more people, or affects 5 or more devices, it goes to the professional services team for solutioning. Of course, that
Love
can
it.
also be a consideration, as Josh said.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing I want to throw out there for people like, attending is obviously this is a project management webinar, but again, going back to the MSP, it's something that like all of us have to do in some sort of capacity, unless maybe you're a tier 1 help desk, but even then you're still assisting with this. Like I've never had the title of a project manager, but I have tons of experience with managing projects. So it's just something that does affect the organization as a whole. And it's a valuable skill for everybody in the organization to go through and learn. And I appreciate you guys having me on here and getting to hang out with you guys and talk about this stuff.
Thank you, Josh. It's been awesome. I love
Yeah,
learning.
it's been great. Talk baseball, fun facts, and restaurants. That's basically the you only thing you missed was weather and balding. Those are the other topics I commonly cover. But other than that, you got the main ones.
I live in Sioux Falls, which has there's a I don't know what website does it, but they basically rank the most chaotic weather. So like who has the most like
Oh,
widespread? Like it could be 20, it could be 70. You just never know. So I think Rapid City is like number one. Sioux Falls is in the top five. Um,
really?
so it's like you literally never know what our weather is going to be. It's crazy. And then companies based out of San Diego, so go Padres, who has the number one. Like you always know what the weather's going to be. So it's yeah, well, weather is just Midwest's favorite topic because it could be
That's a
good.
great fun fact.
I am from the Midwest, and Ohio would experience 3 seasons in one day.
Yep.
I don't miss that, being in Charleston now. I don't miss that a ton.
Hey, isn't Ohio the new Florida? Did I hear that? Like, how everyone rags on Florida? Isn't Ohio the new Florida? Is that a
Everyone's
thing?
been ragging on Ohio, Lewis.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just keep trying to keep up here.
God.
Uh,
Okay, well, if anyone else has any other questions for Lewis and Josh, please send them in. I'll also send the recording afterwards, and I'm going to put their LinkedIn's on there. So I don't know if Josh and Lewis have their messages open or not, but you can always send them a little note through there too. One more thing, something that our wonderful Amanda from Brand has put together with Lewis is a scope creep response kit, which I read through it. It's actually pretty awesome and insightful. I'm going to attach that to the follow-up email with the recording. So if anyone wants those fun tips or wants to read them and say what they think, you can come to next month's webinar and tell us exactly what you thought of it. Okay.
Cool.
Um, Anyways, thank you, Josh, so much for joining. We appreciate you so much. And we'll give you a few minutes back in your day. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Colleen.
thank you.
Bye-bye.